Hey, I'm back. Imagine that. This is part 2 of my welcome video. And as I said, I'm going to go through some of the readings for this first week with you. By the way, I forgot to tell you a little bit about me, and you'll read some of this in the Getting to Know You discussion board, but I'm from East Ridge. Now, some of you already know this because some of you I may have actually had in 1010 before. But East Ridge, Tennessee, that's how we talk in East Ridge. I don't know if y'all know where East Ridge is at. It's behind the at. But I like to lovingly refer to it as the armpit of the redneck world. It's an interesting place, and I always tell a fun story about names on the first day of class usually. I won't go through my whole spiel there, but essentially it's to tell you that if you don't like your name, it could be worse. So when I went to school, with a young lady whose last name was O'Rear, O''R''E''A''R, and her parents, in their great wisdom, named her Fanny O'Rear. So you can imagine how this poor kid was just tormented through her life over her name. And Fanny and I became friends, sort of, because we were the last two people chosen to be on anyone's team in gym class. And that happened with Fanny because she was kind of odd. She was very morbid. She wanted to be an embalmer when she grew up and work at a funeral home. And actually she wound up not achieving her dream, but she kind of achieved the next best thing. She became a beautician in a funeral home doing hair and makeup for the deceased. But anyway, Fanny was not wanted on anyone's team because she had big, thick bifocal glasses. She just could not see anything. So the ball could just smack her right in the head and she never saw it coming. I did not have that excuse. I had excellent vision, but I was just a klutz, and I'm still a klutz. So I'll tell you more stories about East Ridge and Fanny along the way, probably. But the important thing to remember right now is if you hate your name, it could be worse. And if there's a nickname that you would like for us to call you by, let us know that in the Getting to Know You discussion board. And we can do that within reason. I will add that caveat. So if you want to look at the paper 1 assignment sheet, that's our very first major paper that I want to go ahead and introduce you to so that you can have that sort of in the back of your mind as we're doing our readings. You'll find it by going to Content up at the top of our Bright Space course page, and then Major Paper Assignments and Related Materials. You click on that, and then you click on Paper 1. And it's, guess what, a short fiction analysis, because our first unit is short fiction. So if something's fictional, that means that it may not be 100% true. Something about it may be embellished or changed, maybe a lot, maybe a little. And if we're going to analyze something, think about what that means. You're going to sort of break it down and try to figure it out. So for this first major paper, you'll choose one of the following topics on which to write a 3 to 4 page essay. So the first choice that you could choose would be to write a character analysis of any one of the main characters that we'll be reading about in this first unit. So any one of the main characters from any of our readings in this first unit on fiction. So you're going to analyze that character. And how do you do that? Well, authors use several ways to create a character, and this is the same thing you'll do when you analyze them. You're going to think, what does this character say and do? What do other characters say about him or her, or think about him or her? What's the author's description of the character's physical appearance? And then what kind of comments are made in the story that reveal this character? So it's just like a person in real life. You're going to think, what do we know about this character? And remember too, character is always, always, always connected to theme. And that's the big overarching idea that we want to consider. Theme, that universal concept, that underlying meaning that the author is trying to impart to us about life. So think about how that character that you're looking at helps to reveal the story's main theme. And also, speaking of themes, see if you can at some point in your paper connect into our class theme. How might this character be enslaved, or how might this character enslave somebody else? So that's your first option, character analysis. The second option would be to compare and contrast any two main characters that we're looking at in Unit 1. So you want to consider all of the things we said above about, what does the character say and do? What do other characters think about him or her, etc. You also want to think about what conflicts each character is facing, how others view him or her, whether or not and how he or she changes over the course of the story. How are these characters, again, enslaved, and or how do they enslave someone else? And all of this will start to feel a lot more clear to you as you engage in the readings and the activities. So the important dates for Paper 1, the 20th of September, you'll upload your idea worksheet before 11:59 p.m. And you'll go to the assignments tab there. You'll look at the idea worksheet questions, you'll answer them, and you'll upload that document. And that'll begin getting your brain thinking about Paper 1. The 21st, that very next day, you'll complete an MLA template for Paper 1. There's an exercise there. If you click on Content and on Course Documents, and then on the MLA template for Paper 1, you'll see it. So you can actually start typing a rough draft following the guidelines within that template. And that's going to be really helpful to you. And then on the 27th, which is a Sunday, after you've completed that template, you want to upload your rough draft of that Paper 1 that you just typed into that template by 11:59 p.m. so that I can give you some feedback, so that I can say to you before the final draft is due, hey, you did great with this and this and this, and here's some other ways that you might want to improve. And if you don't do that before the deadline time and date, 10 points are deducted from your Paper 1 grade. So it's important. Then on Monday, the 5th of October, that seems like a long time away too, the final draft of Paper 1 is due. And you would upload it into the Assignments tab and look for Paper 1 final draft. So that's the timeline. So we have a good long time to work on Paper 1. So it needs to be at least 3 full pages in length, obviously typed, double spaced, 12-point Times New Roman font, standard margins. For this assignment, you only need to document your primary source, the text or text, depending on which option you choose that you're analyzing. So you've got to have quotations from those readings in the body of your paper, citing them. And then you've got to have a separate works cited page that contains a listing of those sources that you used. So if you continue to look at that Paper 1 assignment sheet, you'll see the objectives there, what your goals should be. You'll see questions that you should be asking yourself as you're writing that will help you stay on track. And then you'll see examples that I give you of a possible thesis and game plan for both option 1 and option 2. And so that's just an overview of that very first paper assignment that I think will be helpful to you. And now I want to take a moment to talk to you about the What is Literature document. So you'll find it by going to Content, Course Documents, and What is Literature. And note that when you get down to the bottom, you'll have to click Load More, because they're in alphabetical order and there might be a few more, documents there that you have to click the Load More for to be able to see them all. So this is a little document that asks, what is literature? Why does it matter? If you don't understand why something matters, you're not really going to care whether you do well at it or not. What does literature do? What are its genres, its types or kinds? Why should we read it? Why should we care about it? So literature is imaginative or creative writing, especially of recognized artistic value, right? And the 3 major kinds are fictional stories, poems, and plays. Some of these terms are going to come back to haunt you later in the semester on an exam on literary terms. that is worth a pretty good chunk of your final grade in the class. And so when we get ready to review for that exam, I'll be telling you what to really be focusing on from these documents. But this is one of the documents, as well as the elements of fiction, that you'll need to look back at. The canon, if you have ever studied the Bible as a biblical scholar, you know what that term means in terms of biblical literature. The canon there refers to the books that made it into what we now know as the Holy Bible. But for our purposes here, we're referring to a list of what is considered the most highly, widely esteemed works of literature according to scholars. So we're looking at some texts this semester that are already considered part of the canon. Some are maybe too new to be to have earned the status, but they've maybe drawn praise. Our goals are to encourage you to think for yourself about what counts as literature, what is imaginative writing, what has artistic value, because writing, my friends, is art. It is art, just like music and dancing, and in anything that you do that is artistic, drawing, sculpting. And then we want to give you the tools to communicate your thoughts effectively to other people, and then to think about what makes a story or a poem different from, say, reading a technical manual, right? So there are lots of writing that we can study from a literary point of view, an essay, a song lyric, a screenplay, etc. But what makes the literary way of reading different from normal reading? So reading in a literary way doesn't just focus on gaining information to solve a problem. So like my husband, God bless him, he is a retired audio engineer / audio mixer. And he's a great guy, but he hates to read. Hates to read. The only thing the man reads are audio manuals. I'm thinking, OMG, how boring is this nonsense, right? I go crazy when I'm just looking at page 1. I'm like, what? What? I don't even know what this means. But he's all into this. However, if I tried to get him to read a novel or a play or a short story or a poem or something I'm writing or, something like that, it's like, so that's not his thing. But the literary way is about something deeper. It's about uncovering deeper layers of meaning within a text that connects to something universal, something we all feel and relate to. So it's like the difference between taking a trip just to get there as opposed to taking the journey to fully experience and enjoy the ride along the way. So what does literature do? This is cool, man. This is cool if you're a big old literature nerd like me. It doesn't just talk about things, but works of literature bring these experiences and events alive for us by representing real human experience. So they become an experience for us when we read or when we watch a film. Because guess what? Film and television begins with writing, my friends. It begins with writing. So literature engages emotions, imagination, senses, and intellects, and it offers us an escape from our everyday lives. And boy, do we need that during the pandemic, right? So when I'm reading something, when I'm watching a film, when I'm in the midst of a song lyric, my friends, is just a poem set to music. I'm able to leave the confines of my own time and place and my own social class and my own habitual way of thinking, which may be almost like an enslavement for me. Think about that. I'm able to go into the past. I'm able to travel to the future and think about what that would be like. I'm able to learn more about who I am. Literature will not usually offer the answers to life's questions. I hate to tell you that, but it won't. And it does, though, allow you to put yourself in the place of someone else, to put yourself in that person's shoes, to imagine and even feel the consequences of human behavior, and to gain insight into someone else's point of view. And that is such a gift, because that gives you empathy. That gives you the ability to understand other people and to have other people understand you. And literature awakens us to the beauty, the complexity of words, language. It's so awesome. That's our primary tool for engaging with and understanding and shaping the world every day. Words. They're probably the last thing you're going to do before you die. Think about it. If you're fortunate, you'll still have the ability to speak a few words before you leave this world. And those words are the last thing that you're going to be able to impart to someone. Think about the power of words. They heal, they birth, they can kill, right? And that's why 10:10 and 10:20 are so important, because you got to learn the power of words. So literature is like this huge ongoing conversation. And what you're going to find out is that there can be lots of different interpretations of a short story or a poem or a play. Lots of them. As many sometimes as there are students in a classroom. And some might say, well, hey, then why are we even talking about it if that's the case? Au contraire, my friends. That is when the discussion gets really interesting, because there's no right answer. There's no one right answer in a literature or English classroom to interpreting a text. And so in sharing your thoughts about what this really means, the theme, testing it against your peers' responses and your instructor's guidance, you can hone your skills, right? And the really cool thing is that after you do that, the work's meaning can change again when you reread it. You can be like, oh wow, I missed this whole level of meaning here. And so what we do with literature changes what it does to us. It is pretty cool. I want to go over with you too the other reading for today, which is also found in course documents, and it's the elements of fiction. So what it takes to sort of put a piece of fiction together. And the neat thing is that a lot of these ideas here you can use, and a lot of the terms you can use in paper one. I'm not going to go through all of them with you, but I'll go through some of them. You probably know what an allegory is. You can read that on your own. And an allusion, not an illusion, like a magical illusion, but an allusion, which is a reference maybe in a short story or poem to a famous person or place or phrase. And it works because of the associations and the connotations. Whoa, there's a word we're going to talk a lot about. And that means all the baggage, the associations that words carry with them, right? So there's denotative meaning, there's connotative meaning. When you hear that word denotative, think dictionary, denotative, dictionary, actual meaning of a word. Connotative meaning of a word, all the associations you make with that word when you first hear that word. Names can be a common form of allusion, make you think of something else, and we'll see how that's going to work. Ambiguity, a word can have more than one meaning at the same time, which is interesting, but it also can result about uncertainty on the part of the reader at first. So I give you the example of Young Goodman Brown, if you ever read that kind of spooky story. The ending is ambiguous. So did Brown really have a meeting with the devil? Ooh, and others bent on evil? Or did he just dream the whole thing? Have you ever seen a film like that where you get to the end and you don't know whether this really happened or the guy just dreamed it or he just imagined it or whatnot? Ambivalence refers to where a work has conflicting feelings or attitudes, right? And the work may even call for confusion on your part as a reader, which seems odd, but we're going to see how that works as we go along. You know that an analogy is a comparison of two things that may not be alike on the surface, and you have metaphor and you have simile. And we know what characters are. They're the people in these short stories or novels or poems or plays that we're going to be reading about. But there are different types of characters. So I want you to familiarize yourself with these different types of characters. Some characters are flat, and that means just like what it sounds like it's going to mean. They do not change or grow. They don't add clues. They're just sort of a type, right? And they're also called stock characters. A caricature is kind of similar, Not a fully developed character, but a caricature has one single dominant trait, like the villain, the bad guy, or the clown, the funny guy. A static character changes little, if at all, but here's the deal. Things happen, the changes happen to the character, not within, right? Have you ever known a person like that? Stuff happens to them, but they don't necessarily change inside. A round character may grow or change, is bigger than life, may be dynamic, stands out, isn't just like part of the crowd, has a lot of real human traits, is fully developed by the author, is as complex as a real person. And then the one we really like is the dynamic character. The dynamic character is true to life, real, as complex as a real person, but the dynamic character is always changed by the actions through which he or she passes. And in fact, the whole point of the work is to reveal that change in that character. So those are just some different kinds of characters. Epiphany, that's a word that means aha. It's like the aha moment, that character's moment of realization. This is what life is truly about. The next thing you'll see on that Elements of Fiction sheet is the dramatic plot structure. And unfortunately, in the uploading process, it sort of caused my formatting to go crazy there, making those two weird lines, so ignore that. But basically, look at the definitions of all of these terms, because we're going to be talking about a lot of these terms. We know that plot is just what happens in the story, right? It's a series of related events and actions, and this is carefully selected by the author. I don't like that. I don't know that real creative writers sit around and carefully select things. Rather, I think that they are creative channels, right? And they feel their writing, they feel their art, they know their craft. But they're not just sitting and thinking, now I'll let this happen and then I'll let that happen. That's a little bit too contrived for creative writing. But here's sort of the basic plot structure of a work. You've got exposition. That's what happens at the very beginning, right? All that introductory material that tells us where we are, kind of what's happening. You've got the rising action that's kind of leading up. You've got the complications, the problem, the trouble caused by the conflict of opposing forces. You've got the conflict, that struggle that's growing out of the interaction between the two opposing forces. And any good story is going to have some trouble brewing. Now, this is why I like The Young and the Restless, or as my son used to call it, The Young and the Rest of Us. I suppose he was the young and I was the rest of us. I used to make him watch this. And right now it's not on. This has been a terrible, terrible thing in my life that they're playing reruns. And I miss The Young and the Restless so much. So much so my husband would DVR it for me when I would be teaching, and then we would watch it over dinner. And he would always act like he did not care about it. He hated it, right? But then he's always asking, now wait a minute, she's married to Victor? I thought that she used to be Victor's daughter-in-law. I'm like, yeah. So see, he secretly loves the conflict and the complications in The Young and the Rest of Us. So the conflict might be a struggle against nature, where you've got a character who's actually pitted against a force of nature. It might be a struggle against society, like the orphans in the Dickens novels. It might be a struggle for mastery of two elements within one person, like in Macbeth. Usually there's more than one conflict, right, in a story, but conflict is the raw material out of which the plot is constructed. The climax is the turning point, the point of our highest interest as readers, where we're making the greatest emotional response. And then we go into the falling action, which follows the climax. Shows the downfall of the hero, maybe in a tragedy. It might end with a catastrophe. It might end with a resolution. Or denouement. That's fun to say. Say it, denouement, French word. It means literally unknotting. So the solution to the mystery, the explanation or outcome, etc., right? Point of view is just that point of view from which the story is told, the eyes through which we're seeing the piece. And you can read here about all of the various points of view and how they sort of help us to understand the piece. And some of them are interesting, like, you know, if it's a first person narrator, you're hearing the words I and me. And the narrator may be a naive narrator, doesn't understand the real meaning of events necessarily as he or she is relating them. Interior monologue, where the story is taking place only in the mind of the character, and that's an interesting one. But generally, we're going to have third person objective, or we're going to have, you know, omniscient third person, something like that. Setting, we know that's where, when, under what conditions the story or the play or the whatever it is happening. It's also the customs, the values of the people, the climate of the place. It can be a dominant element, it can be important, but it never exists by itself. So ask yourself, what does setting contribute to the whole of this work? Theme is our big thing. We are always, always, always about theme. Everything we write, everything we think about in this class, the big goal is figuring out what are the themes. So it's the central idea, the insight into life, the statement about what life means. It may deliberately be ambiguous. We may disagree on what it is. There may be more than one. And it may not be in accord with our own values and beliefs as readers. But we can identify the theme without accepting it as being right or true. And usually it's not handed to you on a silver platter, I hate to tell you. It's usually kind of underlying. And it explores issues and questions. It might propose a tentative answer. So to get to theme, you want to ask yourself, okay, what is this piece saying about the way life is? And you want to think about how has the protagonist, the main character that we identify with here, changing? And then what's the central conflict and its outcome? So that's an overview of the 3 readings for this week. And when we look ahead to next week, we're actually going to plunge in to some of the readings that you can write about on paper 1. And one of them is an excerpt from Night by Elie Wiesel. And it is an account of the Holocaust. So it's riveting. So I hope that you have been helped by some of the things that I've said, and I wish you so much luck in all of your classes this semester. I'm excited to work with you. Welcome to 1020.